Hello and welcome to WJTS in Form. At this edition of WJTS in Form, we're going to talk about food safety with Jan Dougan, who is the Purdue Extension Home Educator for Du Bois County. Jan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill.
Oftentimes we talk about how to cook foods, what right foods to eat, but we also should be concerned about food safety because people are going to start canning. We're going to be in picnics, and I know sometimes you make potato salad. How long can you leave that out? Little things like that. Let's talk about food safety.
Okay, let's talk about some basics of food safety and really thinking about at the home because, you know, we're promoting everyone to eat more fruits and vegetables, but we want you to do that safely. So one of the keys to having safe food is proper handling of that food. So the first thing everyone needs to do is always wash your hands. Washing hands is the number one thing that we as individuals can do to help keep our food supply safe and also to keep us healthy. So when we wash our hands, we want people to wash their hands for 20 seconds. Now most people think, oh yeah, I do that. But in a recent program that I was at, I asked everyone to start washing their hands, wash the palms, wash the backs of their hands, wash in between their fingers, wash their fingertips, and wash up their arms, which is the proper way of washing your hands. And everybody was done in about 10 seconds. So we really need to wash our hands longer with running water and soap, and the rubbing action helps to eliminate any pathogens that might be on our hands, any germs, any mold, any, whatever is out there that might be on our hands. And an easy way to remember that is to sing happy birthday slowly to yourself or sing your ABCs, to yourself. So that you wash your hands long enough to get anything off of your hands that we need to. And then, we're ready to handle the food that we want to prepare.
Should we wash our hands between each food that we're preparing, or?
Well, it depends. If you change jobs, then yes, you should. Especially if you go from like cutting or preparing raw meat for the grill, and then you go to slicing and dicing salad stuff.
Okay.
You should really wash your hands in between those jobs. You should at home. This is at home. This isn't for any restaurant or
there are different
food service
policies for that.
organization.
Yes, this
There's
is for you at
different
home.
policies for that. And we do, at the Purdue Extension office, we do provide ServSafe training and certification for food establishments in the county, and so we do have different guidelines and policies that they need to learn in keeping the food safe for us when we visit their establishment. But this information that we're sharing today is really just about at home and things that you can do at home to keep your food safe. But washing hands is really key. And then another thing that you want to think about doing is sanitizing your kitchen. And I don't think many people really think about doing that. They clean their kitchen, but they often don't think of sanitizing their kitchen. But your surfaces should be washed with hot, soapy water, and then a solution of 1 tablespoon of unscented liquid chlorine bleach per gallon of water. That can be used to sanitize your area. So, I try to do that on a regular basis just to make sure that everything is sanitized and ready to for the food preparation. So you think about washing your hands, you think about sanitizing your kitchen, think about cutting boards that you use. You should have a cutting board that's designated for raw foods like the meat, and then a cutting board that's designated for vegetables or fruits that you might want to cut out, and that just helps to eliminate cross-contamination between those two food products. Probably one of the most common forms of cross-contamination that I've ever observed is that when you take meat to the grill, this time of the year, this is a popular thing everyone's doing. So let's say you're going to be cooking pork chops, and you put those raw pork chops on your plate. You season them how you want to season them, and then you carry them out to the grill, and hopefully you use tongs to put those pork chops on the grill. Then you take that plate back into the kitchen, right? What do you do with that plate?
Rinse it off.
you rinse it off.
Yes. But that's not good enough?
That's not good
okay,
enough.
I'm breaking the rules again.
Yeah. That plate needs to go in the dishwasher.
Okay.
You should not reuse that plate for the cooked meat that you're going to put on it. Okay? You need to get a clean plate. And don't feel bad about that, because my husband was a culprit of that, and I caught him doing that. And so there's had to be some home education going on, and so now we use a different plate. But it's just to help eliminate the risk of cross-contamination, because if you have raw meat on a plate, there's a chance that there's juices remaining on that plate. Rinsing it might get it off, but chances are not completely, because it just might not happen. So then you need to use the clean plate.
Okay.
If you put the cooked meat back on the plate that you had with the raw juices on it, where are the raw juices?
Going to go right back into the meat.
Right.
Or on the outside
And
of it.
you've cooked the meat, which helps in killing any pathogens if they're in the meat, as long as you cook the meat to the proper temperature. So that's something else we want to include, that we want everyone to try to think about using a food thermometer to check the internal temperature of your meats when you're grilling them.
And almost all meat thermometers will have some sort of indication of what is safe for different foods.
Yes. And if you do not have that, we have that information available, or you could go to USDA. They have some charts that are available. I actually have a little chart I keep inside my cabinet in my kitchen, so I can just open it up and look at it. Most of the newer thermometers, they have those right on there, as you said, so that you can just read it as a reminder.
And we're talking about meat, right?
Right.
Vegetables, correct. Is there an internal temperature
no,
for that?
We don't need to worry about vegetables,
because
you could eat those raw. Correct. So, you know, another thing as far as food safety at home that we want to recommend people do is we call it a clean sweep of your refrigerator once a week. So pick a day. You know, I usually do it before I go to the grocery, whatever day that is, and I just look into my refrigerator, and anything that's been in there, the cooked leftovers or anything that's been in there, and the general rule is after 4 days. So if it's been in there for 4 days, then, you know, I just toss it. If I know that I'm not going to be able to use leftovers or plantovers, I put them in my freezer and package them usually in individual serving sizes, so my husband or I can enjoy those whenever we need to. But most of the time, if anything gets in there and it's in there longer than the 4 days, then it just gets pitched, because I'm not willing to take the risk. I've had foodborne illness before, and you don't feel very good with that, and I just don't think it's worth the risk to take that chance of getting ill again, because there are some foodborne illnesses that just make us feel like we have a little bit of the flu, we might be nauseated, we might have to be in the bathroom a little bit more, but there's some that are very deadly, and actually people end up in the hospital and can die from foodborne illness. So it is something that's serious that we want to take cautions in our kitchens to prevent it.
And really a lot of it is just, some of that's just common sense.
There is a lot of common sense. We keep our kitchens clean, we keep the appliances clean, we try to sanitize. You know, anything that's brought into our kitchen to use, like any of the produce, we need to be sure that we wash it properly. Any kind of produce with a skin, you know, we might need to use a vegetable brush on it and cool running water. Any other greens, we need to wash and have the water come over the product. If a produce, like we get some of the bagged lettuces and things that they say pre-wash, you know, it's not mandatory that you wash those. You can if you want, but they are acceptable for use if they have pre-washed on the bag. Another thing to keep in mind is keep your food separate when you're shopping. You know, you don't want to put meat in a grocery sack with other products. A lot of people do a good job at the supermarket or the grocery when you shop, but if you don't go to a store and if you have to bag your own at the store, if you don't have someone else bagging, you need to be aware of that guidelines, and to keep any of the raw seafood, the raw meat, the raw poultry, put them in a plastic bag preferably, and then keep them away from any ready-to-eat foods. And you'll also want to store that in your refrigerator like that. So you wouldn't want to store any meat on the top shelf, because if there would be a leak,
Drip down.
yeah. Now, it used to be in the older refrigerators, and there might be some older models still out there that our viewers are using that have the racks rather than the shelving. There's more risk there.
Sure.
With the shelving, there's less risk, but it still could happen. So you store those products underneath the ready-to-eat products, and then you limit your risk by doing that. So that's just something to keep in mind.
And one way to keep food fresh is use like a Ziploc sort of a bag.
Sure.
It can last well, 4 days is the limit though, but you can make things last a long time by putting in that right away rather than letting it out open.
Sure, and you want to, those zip-type bags remove the oxygen. Make sure you remove the oxygen from it, because that can, depending on what the food is, oxygen can help mature it or make it get older quicker. So if you keep the air away from it, that's a good thing. You want to cool things down quickly before you refrigerate them or freeze them. So if that means putting it in smaller quantities, adding ice to it, putting it in a bowl of ice and stirring it somehow to cool it down quickly, so that we don't cause any foodborne pathogens to grow in the product. So that's key. We want to check our refrigerators. Do you have a thermometer in your refrigerator?
A thermometer in the refrigerator? I don't know.
So how do you know what the temperature of your refrigerator is?
Just put your hand in there and you can kind of feel that spot. No, I don't know.
It needs to be 40 degrees or less. And that's the proper temperature for a refrigerator to keep food safe. So, we really need to check that. We need to have a refrigerator thermometer in there so that we know.
Now let me ask you one more question. How long can you leave food out before you have to worry about putting it away? You just made a pie, or you just grilled some steaks and you're all done eating, and you go in the living room and sit around for a little bit. Or hopefully you get out and go for a walk, right? How long can food set out? Does that depend?
There's different guidelines for different foods,
Okay.
but I think 2 hours. That's
Okay.
the general guideline that just about everything falls into there. There's some foods that could be left out longer, but about 2 hours.
But probably the sooner the better.
Yeah.
But
when families get together and have reunions or family meals and everybody eats at lunch and then the food is just left on the table. I remember my grandmother used to taking a tablecloth and covering the food, and then everyone did whatever they did all afternoon, socialized or played a game of ball game or kickball outside or whatever, and then came back, and had dinner. That's really not a recommended procedure anymore.
the only thing it does is keeps the flies off. But you need to
Yeah.
put the cold things back in the
Right,
refrigerator.
put your cold things back in the refrigerator.
Or a cooler.
Or a cooler, yes, that's properly, filled with ice so that it's going to keep at a safe temperature.
Jan, thank you very much for coming in and talk with us.
You're welcome.
We hope you learned something about food safety. Make sure you practice some of the suggestions that Jan has given you today. Jan Dougan has been our guest on WJTS in.form. We are local people watching local people.